Hey everybody, it's me, Brandon. I'm just looking at some questions that you guys recorded there at the other art fair in Sydney.
We know about your music, we know about your art. We rather suspect that you've probably got other artistic traits as well. So the question is an interesting one. What's your secret? What is it that you've tapped into which has allowed you to be so incredibly creative across so many wonderful disciplines?
Like, what's my secret to being sort of prolific across a number of disciplines, in this case, music and visual art? In answer to your question, first of all, it's a really interesting question, and it's one that occurs to me every once in a while, more so when I'm talking to other artists, though. And I find that there's a thread that is it's like a through line for most artists. At some point in their creativity, there is a through line of self-doubt, which can grow toxic and become, almost like self-loathing. And ironically, a lot of amazing art has been born of some really intense self-loathing. I think across time, we're all familiar with the suffering of an artist or the struggling artist in some capacity. I suppose when it lands squarely in my lap, my reaction to it has been to number one, shake off those sort of that second guessing that can and does occur, and continually give myself permission to explore and explore my curiosity and explore space and explore ideas, especially if they make me feel uncomfortable. I think that's a really good place for artists to kind of delve into. So I don't know, Tim Wilkes, if I'm answering your question as precisely as you'd like me to. It's a big question, though. Like what's the secret to being a multidisciplinary artist? And I don't think it's a secret. I really think that it's almost like a spiritual discipline of sorts, or a psychic discipline, where we give ourselves permission to explore and continually explore. In a way, it's kind of childlike. I've likened it to a sandbox that doesn't have a floor. You just keep digging and digging and digging, and it's fun. There's a lot of joy to be had in the process. So anyway, thanks for your question.
I just wanted to know, can you at all pinpoint one highlight in your life so far?
Can I pinpoint a highlight in my life thus far? I don't know if I can. I've never really been the kind of person that celebrates a win. I don't know if I even really look at moments that way. I like to see or attempt to see things kind of more from a pulled back perspective. It gives me a better sense of process by looking at it at scale. So there's tons of like sort of minutiae, like the tiny lines in the drawing. But a highlight in my life, that's a really tough question. They're really, I think mostly they're the small moments. If I'm gonna really dig into this, it's the tiny things. Like during the pandemic, I finally started growing food, and there is something really fantastic and magical about harvesting broccoli for the first time and then cooking it. You know what I mean? There's something incredible about that, and some of the highlights as well are when I'm finishing an album or finishing a painting. Like when you get to the very, very end stage of it, and there's a part of you that doesn't want it to end because it's so enjoyable to be in that kind of that gooey goodness of creativity and So it's bittersweet in that you know that this process is coming to an end, but then you kind of listen back to it, or you step back from the painting and you allow yourself the moment, like maybe I've made something good. And that's kind of fun as well, as a little kind of pat on the back, I guess. But anyway.
I'd love to know what you do to get through either music or arty creative blocks.
What I do to get through artistic or creative blocks. I've talked about this quite a lot, but I'm happy to talk about it more because I know that it's a very common thing with all people in all walks of life, and whether you're in a creative field or not, we all have moments where we just don't feel inspired. And for me, I try my best to not take it personally. And that seems to take a lot of the kind of weight out of it. Sometimes it's frustrating when you're like, you might have a deadline, or you really, really want to be a good artist that day, and just nothing shows up, I just remind myself that it's not personal. So what I do is I go for a bike ride, or I'll read a book, or I'll go for a surf, or a hike or something like that. I just do something that usually is outdoors. Actually, I'm saying that out loud, and that occurs to me that that's kind of my go-to. I usually just go outside. You breathe fresh air, you interact with the elements a little bit, and it has a tendency to reset. It's always worked for me. So if you're in a place where you can go outdoors, I highly suggest it.
Hey Brandon, just wondering when we can expect your next book.
Y'all can expect my next book. So if you're just joining us, I've published 3 art books. The first one was in 2003. It was called White Fluffy Clouds. The second one was in 2007, I believe, and it was called From the Murks of the Sultry Abyss. And then 2013 or 2014, I always forget which exactly, I published a book called So the Echo. And to answer your question, I have been really painting probably more than I ever have in my life ever since I published the last one, So the Echo. So this whole time period from 2013, 14 up until now, 2021, has been kind of my most prolific. And so there's a lot of material. So at this point, it's really just a matter of like kind of curating it and pulling it all together and then bringing it to production. So I suppose the heavy lifting is done. So I in effect have been working on the book ever since the last one. So I would say sooner than later. I'm hoping sometime in 2022. And if Jen DeSisto has anything to do with it, it'll be sooner than that.
Hey Brandon, I love your art. I'm so shocked and amazed by it, but I have a question for you, and I just want to know if you're happy, and I hope you are, but yeah, let me know.
This person's question made me smile. I would say that I am happy most of the time. Sometimes I'm not happy, and I've learned to allow those moments and kind of sit with them, and once again not take them too personally. And if I feel a kind of a general malaise start to gloss over things, I go outside. And it has, like, in the same way that getting like a creative block, going outside really has a tendency to kind of reset or shake things up. I try to do that and just move. I've really noticed that if I'm in kind of a bad way about something, movement in really any capacity does really magical things. And it's really not magical at all. It just feels magical, but the truth is it's purely chemical. You just get your blood moving and your heart beating faster, and you work up a sweat, or you take a cold dip into the ocean and get your heart racing. It really does fantastic things to your mood. So to answer your question, I am mostly happy.
Do you have any plans to exhibit any more of your art in Australia or down under any time?
Yes, absolutely. It's really just a logistical matter. Australia is quite far from California, but I don't think it's a mystery to anyone who's followed Incubus over the years. We love Australia. I love Australia. There's something really familiar about Australia to me. In fact, it has so many kind of like California vibes to it that it has almost felt like a second home to me when I've been there, which is kind of amazing, especially when you've been on tour for ungodly periods of time and you find a place that feels kind of familiar. You tend to grow like an affinity towards it. So that has never left my heart. I would love to come and do like a solo exhibition in Australia. So if there are any gallery owners or someone with a big backyard or, you know, an event space that you guys think would be appropriate for my work, I would love to do that. And especially as we hopefully are coming out of these strange COVID times, I'm just chomping at the bit to go someplace. I haven't left my house in about a year. So yes, the answer is yes. I would love to do a solo exhibition in Australia. And once again, thank you for your question. At Ada.watercolor asks, I wonder if Brandon keeps sketchbooks or has previous studies before he starts his final piece. I do keep sketchbooks. I work in sketchbooks less and less as I get older. I used to kind of exclusively work in sketchbooks because I was traveling so much with the band that I didn't know any other way to work. So that, honestly, my first two books, White Fluffy Clouds and From the Murks at the Sultry Abyss, are kind of like peeks into my sketchbooks over a 10-year period or so. When I work in sketchbooks now, it's more in like bursts, and I will go through bursts where I'll fill a whole sketchbook in like a week and then put it away and not look at it for a long period of time. And but the stuff that appears in sketchbooks rarely gets translated into a larger piece. I like to look at larger pieces of paper or a big canvas or something really with just no idea what I'm getting into. It's really fun. It's a little bit like climbing a mountain for the first time or paddling out at a new surf break where it's completely alien to you. It's like there's something in you that like almost needs to see what happens if you just start moving lines around, you start pushing ink. So yeah, I'll probably put some of my newer sketchbook stuff in my next book. So you guys can see some of it there. And sometimes I put it on my Instagram too. At Ellie Finn asks, what was your first ever painting and what age were you? I actually don't know how old I was when I first did like a painting. I mean, I'm just gonna go ahead and put it out there that I probably wasn't working in paint until I was a little bit older. I think I was making things with like crayons and snot and shit like that, you know, you do when you're a little kid. But I do remember some of the first things I remember drawing were pains that I had as a kid in my stomach. I was born lactose intolerant. It's a lot of information, sorry, but it's true. So I've had very little, if any, dairy products in my life. And when I did have them, I would have these like terrible stabbing pains in my stomach, and I didn't know how to really deal with it. So my mom would encourage me to draw what I was feeling, which was such a cool kind of artistic prompt that I'm not even sure she was doing. It was just her way of like, I don't know how to comfort my child. Like here's, because she was an artist too. So it was like, here's paper and some pens or some crayons. And so what I started drawing was I would imagine what my stomach looked like, and then I would draw the evil little germs or whatever they were that were poking at my stomach. And then I would, they were like these bad little, you know, like dark green booger looking things. And then I would draw a super germ that had a cape, and he was more like heroic. And I would kind of draw him flying around, and then I would erase the bad germs. And it strangely kind of worked because the pain in my stomach was either go away or I would be distracted from it. So thank you, Mom. That was a really cool artistic prompt. And one that I will probably use in some capacity if I ever have kids one day, God willing. This is a cool question from at Navina_Spirulina. She asks, what advice would you give to someone who wants to make art but has struggled to find their style? I suppose I would say start by making art in whatever way feels the most natural to you, even if it doesn't feel like you've stumbled onto your unique voice quite yet. Just keep moving, keep the pen moving, keep the brush moving, keep the shutter clicking, whatever it is that you're doing, and eventually something happens intellectually and psychologically where you start to understand truly what has been influencing you, and you start to see it in your own work, and you start to understand how much of what is influencing you is appearing in your work, and then you start to realize, like, how much is this my work, or how much of this is really just me filtering these influences through. And the more you do it, the more you start to understand that, then you start to kind of filter out the things that were inspiring you, and you're kind of honoring those influences by doing that. You're honoring the things that inspired you to work, whether it was a band or another artist or something like that, by filtering through them, and you eventually will stumble onto your unique voice. And you might even do so without even knowing it. And then this is a point where it gets really interesting, where sharing your work in some capacity can be extremely informative, because sharing it, and it has a mirroring effect, and someone looks at it objectively, or more objectively than you'd be able to, can say to you, oh wow, that's awful, and it kills you and it hurts you. Or they say, this is really amazing, it reminds me of this, this, and this, which is very informative. Or they say, this is wild, I've never seen anything like it. And they're helping to inform you in this process, because it is a process, and that's something to also remember when you are, once again, as she says, struggling to find your style. It's always good to remember that it is a process. And if you are making art in any capacity with an end goal exclusively in mind, like I want to make art to be famous, or I want to make art to make money, those things aren't bad in and of themselves, but if that is your goal, I would argue that you are doing it for the wrong reasons, because there's so much joy and, for lack of a better term, like enlightening experiences to be had in the process of making art, that it almost becomes, that becomes the reason why you do it. And if you get notoriety or praise, or God forbid you find a career in it, then you cross that bridge when you come to it. But don't do it trying to achieve those things, because I don't really think that that's what art is for, in my opinion. This question is so good, borderline comical, that I have to actually play it and then answer it. So here you go.
Hi Brandon, I just wanted to know if tomorrow ever actually did bring anything, and if it did, were you in fact there with open arms and or open eyes?
Yeah. To answer your question, that's in the lyric, yeah.